Okay. So, again, useful information here. We're talking about knowledge. So, in English copyright law, if you're an artist, there's two things that you can get money from. One is the master recording. So that literally is you go into a studio, you record a track. That track that you own is the master. Okay. The other is publishing, and that is to do with your lyrics and your musical compositions. And those are two completely separate things. And I'll give you an example of that. So I worked for Sony Music, and I dealt with the master recordings of all of Sony's artists. I didn't deal with their publishing. There's a separate company called Sony ATV, who are a big publishing company, completely different building, do completely different things to what I do. They own the publishing, we own the masters, and sometimes you'd have an artist that they would have a master recording deal with Sony, but they would have a publishing deal with Universal or Cobalt or someone completely different. So it doesn't mean that if you've got a deal with a record label, you have to then do a publishing deal with a similar type company. So those are the two ways when you're making a track, you earn money, because you earn money from the sale of the masters, but on top of that, every writer gets a cut when that master gets sold. Okay, we're going to get a little bit deeper and a little bit technical, and bear with me if it gets too complicated. Just put a hand up and we'll see if we can. So if you sell a track on iTunes, then off the top of my head, 12.5% of that sale goes to MCPS. MCPS collects that money for every single track that's sold, and that money goes into a pot for all the writers of that particular track. So if you're a writer, that money is yours. Now, if you're the one person who wrote that track, Happy Days, you get 100% of that money. But if it's been split, and there's you and your mate, or there's you and the producer, because sometimes the producer helps you to write the track, then obviously those cuts are made up. So that's to do with the writing. So as you say, sometimes a producer can get paid twice. They can get paid by you paying them £500 for the costs of the studio and for their producing skills. And then if they helped you to write the lyrics, to add more notes, more choruses, more verses for the composition, musical composition, they are entitled to a percentage of your publishing. And again, just like the producer agreement, it's really important that you agree what those splits are going to be before you leave the studio. Because what you don't want is arguments when the track's doing really well, where the producer's going, hey, I contributed 50% to that, so I need 50% of the publishing. And the artist's going, whoa, no, you just added a bass line in, that's not 50% of the track. So you've got to be really, on the ball and say, right, look, this is business. I'm in the creative industry, I'm enjoying making music, but there's also a business side of things. I know at the end of this you're going to go, oh man, Luke, there's all this paperwork, but actually what it's all about is protecting yourself. So you've sent the producer's agreement, as I said, to pay for the costs of the studio, to pay for their skills, and to get the copyright and the masters back. You've done that. Then when you're sitting in the studio as the artist, at the end of when you've finished recording the track, you need to decide with him or her, whatever the producer is, to say, right, how much honestly do you think you've contributed towards this track? Now, if you, the artist, have come in, you've sung the lyrics yourself, you've composed the music yourself, you've played all the instruments yourself, producer gets nothing. Absolutely nothing. They've not contributed at all. But if it's a work in progress and the producer goes, look, I know you put that chorus in there, but why don't we add that lyric instead of that lyric, and why don't we add that beat, and then I'll do this and I'll do that, and then all of a sudden you've added more. Well, then as an artist, you've got to be respectful and say, right, well, I'll give you 20% or 30% or 50% of the publishing because the track was this and now it's this, and I think it's better because of this, and that's the contribution you've made, so you're entitled to that. So but like I said, you've got to be savvy. And what I recommend is you've got your producer agreement, and the other agreement is what I call a songwriters agreement. and this is what you sign before you leave that studio. And it's not like masses of pages. It's just a couple of pages basically saying, we've come in, we've done this track, and this is how much we've agreed percentage-wise you're going to get from the publishing. So it's not complicated. And it's the same that if you go to a writing camp. If any of you are writers here, you go to a writing camp, you want to make sure before you've ended that writing camp that any songs that you've written with other co-writers, everyone agrees what those splits are before you leave. We touched on it a little bit. A publishing deal is a copyright to be able to use your lyrics in your music and use the musical compositions. So this is really technical, but basically this is the notes. And so that's what a publishing deal is. So every time that track is performed in public, it doesn't have to be by the artist that wrote the track, because sometimes they don't even do that. But every time that's performed, you're entitled to a royalty because you own those lyrics. And that's what the publisher collects. They collect those royalties on your behalf, and then you get paid out by them. But the other major role of a publisher is to try and get those tracks a synchronization. Now I'll explain what that is. A sync or a synchronization is basically getting that track onto a TV advert or a film or a video game or something similar to that, and getting paid for it. So I'm making it up. BMW are going to release a new car and they've heard your track and like, yes, that's going to fit really well with that. Well, you wrote the lyrics to that track. You are entitled to money on that, and it's a publisher's job to go out there, talk to those brands and say, look guys, this is a really great track. It will work really well with your advert. They then pay you quite a nice fee, and then everyone gets paid out. So there's kind of two deals that are available with publishing. One is an all-encompassing everything. So they look after all the different rights you can have in publishing, and you just let them get on with and do it. The other type of deal is what they call an admin deal, which is where you're in charge of your own synchronization, but they will collect the public performance monies for you, and they'll just do the back-end administration for a smaller fee, but they won't push your music out because that's not what you want to pay them for. So publishing deals, they can range from a 1-year deal to a 4 or 5 year deal. But what you've got to realize is when you sign to a publishing deal, everything you write during that, let's say it's a 1-year deal, during that 1-year deal, everything you write is owned by that publisher. Now, they will own it, depending on who they are, for a long period of time. So the shortest period I've ever been able to negotiate down is 10 years. So you write a track now, the deal with the publisher runs out in a year's time, but they will own the lyrics to that composition that you've created for 10 years. So for 10 years, they can keep on collecting money on it, and 10 years, you can't get it back. Now, the maximum that I've seen, this is for the majority of the major publishers, is what they call life of copyright, which is basically death of the writer plus 70 years. So I might as well call that forever. So when you do a publishing deal, you've got to be really sure this is the people that you want to do the deal with, and you've got to be sure that when I start putting pen to paper, I'm comfortable that I say lose that, it sounds a bit harsh, but I will no longer own those lyrics and I won't get them back for a long period of time. But the flip of that is that their job is to go out there and push your music and make you money, because if they don't, then nobody gets paid.